Hi, I'm Casey. I'm a professor in an information science department, and this is the second video in a series about applying for PhD programs. If you're still not sure about whether you want to apply for PhD programs, you should check out my first video about should you get a PhD and maybe reasons why you might not want to. So I've been running PhD admissions for our program for 5 years now, and I have read a lot of applications and talked to a lot of prospective students about their questions, and I am hoping to share my wisdom with you now. Now, my disclaimer for this video is stronger than in the last one in that I am in a STEM field. Specifically, mine is an information science PhD program that is structured a lot like computer science, which means it is a lab-based, grant-driven discipline where PhD students work very, very closely with advisors. In other disciplines, humanities-style disciplines, this is not true, and the application process can actually be a bit different in terms of things that you should do, in terms of how important it is to have a research fit with an advisor, etc. So I really recommend that you talk to people in your field about best practices for applying to PhD programs. That said, some of my advice is broadly applicable anyway, and some of it applies a lot to STEM-based PhD programs if that's what you're going for. I'll also try to mention those differences when I think that they're the most relevant. All right, first piece of advice. Once you've decided which programs to apply for, look early at their applications and their requirements. This includes things like deadlines, of course, but also different programs require different things. You don't want to find out 2 days before the deadline that this one program requires 4 letters of recommendation when all of the other ones only required 3. Also, it is increasingly common for PhD programs to not require GRE scores, and so you want to know whether that's a requirement for the programs that you're applying to before you take the test. Basically, make a list of all of the things that you need. I highly recommend keeping track of all the programs that you're going to apply to in some kind of spreadsheet. All right, second piece of advice, know the faculty in the department that you are applying to a PhD program for. This is in part about making sure that you are applying to the right places in addition to setting yourself up for a good application. For a PhD, it's not enough to just say, oh, I want to do computer science, so I am going to apply to every PhD program in computer science that I can find. There needs to be faculty, preferably more than one, who are doing work in the area that you want to work in. So like, if all of the faculty in a computer science department are doing like theory and operating systems, but you want to do human-computer interaction, then who is your advisor going to be? That is a way to know that maybe that's not the appropriate program for you. And I will probably do a whole video on how to decide which PhD programs are appropriate for you. But that's probably the most important thing, that there are good research matches. Because also, if you're not doing the kind of work that you like, you're going to be miserable anyway. Even if you're applying to a more humanities-style PhD program where maybe the like specific research match between you and a specific faculty member is not as important, there still needs to be a general sense that the type of work that's happening in that department is the kind of thing that you want to do. So for example, communication is a huge discipline. Like, for example, do you want to do organizational communication? Do you want to do rhetoric? Like, those are two very different things, and you should see if there are faculty who are who you want to be when you grow up, essentially. So knowing the faculty in the department and what kind of research they do is actually really important for 2 reasons. And the first one is my third piece of advice, which is that you should reach out to faculty who you are interested in working with. Now, this comes with a big caveat that, again, this varies by discipline, and in some that might be weird. So if you're an undergrad right now in the discipline that you're wanting to pursue a PhD in, you should totally ask faculty in your department, like, is this a thing that people do? I doubt that it would come off bad if you accidentally do it when maybe you shouldn't, but it definitely helps when it is appropriate. That said, it is not a requirement. We absolutely get applications from PhD students where they didn't reach out to any faculty ahead of time, and it's not a problem. It can just be really helpful for you. Part of this is that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, some of PhD applications is a little bit like job hunting, and that there's a bit of, it's not you, it's them. For example, if you want to apply to a PhD program where there's literally only one faculty member that you can see yourself working with, what if that faculty member is A, totally out of funding, or B, has like a bazillion PhD students already? They might not be able to take on new students, which means that if you got into that PhD program, you might have to work with someone else, at least for a little while. And sometimes that's just not ideal for you. So this is definitely something that a faculty member could be honest with you about if you reach out to them ahead of time. Like, it is unlikely that I might take new PhD students this year. However, here are some other colleagues in the department who are doing work that you might not know about that I think maybe could be a good fit for you. So if you reach out to one faculty member, they're likely to point you to others, for example. I mean, don't be discouraged by that because you never know. And to the extent that like you don't feel like you're wasting money on time or application fees, it doesn't hurt to apply anyway, because like maybe that faculty member will strike gold on grant proposals before the end of the year when they have to make decisions about new students. Now, I could probably do a whole video on how to write this email to a prospective advisor, but the main thing is make sure that it's personalized. I have gotten so many form letter emails from students. I'm actually listed as affiliate faculty in the computer science department at my university, and the number of emails that I get that are like, I'm studying operating systems and would like to be your PhD student. And I'm just thinking, do you have any idea who I am? So don't do that. Be polite. Tell them why you are reaching out to them. I am very interested in X kind of research. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to like spend hours and hours researching every single faculty member in your area because that gets ridiculous. But look to see what the most recent papers they're writing are, and is that something that you're interested in? You can also look and see what the research that their current PhD advisees are doing, because this also tells you something about how flexible that advisor is in terms of the kind of research that they advise. Some people, for example, have a very narrow research area. Some are sort of, as long as you're doing something related to social computing, come on in. It really varies. And that's the way to tell, is by looking at what their students are leading. And also, when you write this email, try to suggest various modes of interaction. Please don't demand a meeting. Like, can we set up a Skype call the next week? So for example, if the answer from that faculty is I'm definitely not taking new PhD students, that would probably be a waste of both of your time. They will probably offer to answer questions via email, for example. But if it's a professor who's like really excited to recruit new students, and this is especially true for new faculty, they like really want good students. In that case, they're probably gonna want to talk to you. All right, so the other reason to know the faculty in the department, and this is true for any kind of PhD program that you're applying to, is so that you can mention specific faculty in your statement of purpose / personal statement, whichever it is they're asking for. This shows that you know the program and that there is a specific reason that you are applying to that program. Every year we get applications where I can tell that they have applied to every single program that exists in information science and have sent the exact same application to all of them. I mean, it's a little bit of an indication that you haven't done your research, or that maybe you don't really know what kind of work you want to do. Like, if every program is really the same as any other program, then have you found that thing that you're passionate about? Because not all programs are the same. So you should try to find a way to connect your research goals to the kind of work that's happening in the department. I confess this is a bit of a tricky line to walk, and you don't have to do it perfectly and it'll be fine. But basically you want to show that connection while not seeming too rigid. The reason is, again, you might not get interest from like the specific faculty member that you think you're interested in. It could be that someone that you don't even know who's doing that kind of work might see your application and pull it out. And so you don't want to make it sound like I want to come here only to work with this specific person and do this specific project. In fact, don't like propose a very specific dissertation topic, like I am going to do 3 studies and they will be this, this, and this, because that's probably not going to be the case anyway. And if all the faculty read it and are like, well, I don't see myself advising that specific dissertation, you need to show some flexibility as well. You should also emphasize research experience. This is one of the most important things, and it shows not only that you have experience and you know what you're doing, but also that you know what it means to be a researcher, and therefore it's likely that this PhD thing really is for you. That said, if you don't have research experience, maybe look back to a class where you did a project that was research and talk about that, or talk about why you know that research is the thing that you want to do. If you've been out of school for a while, talk about what you've been doing and how this led you to want to pursue a PhD. There's probably a lot more here. I'm guessing that what to put in a personal statement is a whole other video, but those are sort of the things that come to mind immediately. And again, you should find out what the norms of your discipline are for this kind of thing. And also, if you can, get people to read it for you. All right, my next piece of advice: be smart with your letters of recommendation. Now, the best letter is from someone that you've done research with and who's going to say good things about that. This shows that you know what you're doing, etc. And honestly, the best thing that I can read in a letter of recommendation is, I would take on this student as a PhD advisee immediately. I've written that in letters before. If you don't have direct research experience with a faculty member, consider classes where you've done research and whether the professor of that class could write a letter that speaks to that as well. You could also consider people who know you very well in, for example, a professional context, though I would say don't have a lot of those kinds of letters. I would say emphasize faculty. Like if you have 3 letters, maybe 2 of those are from faculty members and 1 of them is from someone else. If you ask someone to write you a letter of recommendation only because you took a class with them, make sure that, obviously you got an A in the class, but also that they remember you and that there are specific things about your performance in that class that they can talk about. So for example, if it was a seminar and there were 10 students in it and they can talk about how you dominated the class discussions and knew so much and wrote the best paper they've ever seen. That's another thing, is if it's a class and they can speak to your writing skills, that also can be super helpful. Do not ask someone to write you a letter of recommendation just because you got an A in the class and there were 100 students in it and they're not going to be able to say anything about you. If the letter says they got an A in my class, that is not useful. If you're having trouble with this and you ask someone who you think might not know you as well, or actually you should do this regardless, send them a copy of your CV/resume and your personal statement, because they might just pull things straight from that. Here's another question, should I try to get a letter from someone who is a name? If I'm an undergrad in a department that has super fancy professor that I know that everyone else is going to know who they are, should I ask them to write me a letter of recommendation? So if this is someone that actually knows you and can write you a good letter anyway, then Yahtzee, yes, do it, because that can be something good to say, oh my gosh, this person that I really respect and admire wrote a letter for this student. However, if all they write in that letter is they got an A in my class, that is worse. That is not useful. A letter from fancy famous professor who says they got an A in my class is definitely not as good from someone like me who says this is the most amazing student I've ever seen and I would take them on in a heartbeat. So definitely keep that in mind when you're choosing your letter writers. Also, when you ask someone to write you a letter of recommendation, say, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Because anyone can write you a letter, but if it's bad, that's not useful. You only want people, regardless of who they are, to write you a strong letter. So try to find that out ahead of time. And how to set yourself up for some of these good letters of recommendation is probably between the lines here, do research, get to know professors, etc. All right, next piece of advice. Probably don't stress about test scores. A lot of PhD programs are dropping GRE requirements, including ours just recently. This is for reasons of equity and honestly research that shows that maybe they're not that useful anyway. But making students pay a huge amount of money to be able to send these test scores to everywhere and to be able to take the tests multiple times, etc. It's just really a problem. This was a big thing that I personally pushed for. And even when they are required, sometimes they're just not that important in the overall review process. I at least barely even looked at them. And I'll tell you, for example, that my GRE scores were not hot. Like, I actually did much better on the LSAT than I did on the GRE. And I've known people who had perfect GRE scores that did not do great in a PhD program. So your mileage may vary. That said, this could definitely be different in different programs, particularly in big ones. It might be that they have to do numerical cutoffs because they just get such a huge number of applications. But in smaller PhD programs especially, I'm certain that they're doing holistic applications. It's also possible that the type of program you're applying to, different scores might be different. So for example, whether your quant score matters more than your qual score. The other thing is that sometimes PhD applications will have a writing sample or maybe a optional writing sample. So for example, if you submit GRE scores where your qual or writing score are very low, that's when you might want to submit a writing sample to show that you actually can write. And if, for example, you're applying to a math PhD program, then that's a case when like maybe your quant GRE score does matter a lot. So your mileage may vary based on this, but I wouldn't let low scores discourage you from trying. All right, so those are my big pieces of advice for the application process. So now let me say a little bit about what I specifically look for in PhD applications, and I have no idea how widespread my particular orientation towards this is. So when I open up a PhD application, here's the order that I read things in. Personal statement first, letters of recommendation second, and then everything else. I usually don't actually look for like what school you went to or what you studied or whatever. I actually think that the personal statement is the most important thing. It shows what kind of work you want to do, what kind of experience you have, and why you want to go to this particular PhD program. To me, those are the most important things. I find it a big plus when students have some kind of research experience, again, not because like they have to prove to me that they know how to do it, but to show that like you know what you're getting into. That said, not a requirement, and there are definitely reasons why it can still be fine to not have research experience. I also want to see that they have interesting ideas but can fit into the kind of work that I do so that I can actually advise them well. Like there are students who have wanted to work with me who want to do work that I just feel like I can't be a good mentor because it's a bit too far outside of my expertise. I want to see that someone is eager to learn and that they know why they want to do this and that they are passionate about research and about getting a PhD. Also, interesting backgrounds and interdisciplinarity in particular are a plus. I see students sometimes saying like, oh, should I maybe if I'm applying to a STEM PhD, I shouldn't mention my art minor. No, totally mention your art minor. Like that actually makes you more interesting. But really in the end, this is so individual that it's really hard to say. And again, something that I hinted at earlier, sometimes seriously, it's not you, it's them. There are reasons why you might not get into a PhD program in a particular application cycle that have nothing to do with how awesome you are. It might have to do with the number of PhD students already in the program and particularly funding concerns. How many new PhD students can they support? How many new PhD students can a particular advisor support? Is what you want to do a good fit for the program and for specific faculty? So you either have to be willing to completely change your research interests if you want to go to that school in particular, or you'd be better off somewhere else where there's someone who's a better advisor fit for you. And finally, good luck. If you've decided to take this journey and you are applying to PhD programs, I am confident that you will be able to find the right program for you. And if you do strike out, know that it is not the end of the world. I actually applied for PhD programs earlier in my life and was rejected from every single one of them. It turns out that that was a good thing for me. I actually can't see myself having been in any of those programs because my interests changed so drastically over the next few years. And so something that you might consider is if you strike out, you might look at whether your dream PhD programs have master's programs. It sometimes can be good to do a master's degree because you get more research experience. And if it's at the university that you want to go to for your PhD, sometimes you can actually just slide into a PhD program if you do really well doing research as a master's student. And also because of all the reasons I suggested, if you apply again the next year, you might get in because of any of those things that were outside of your control. So even if you don't do well, it's not the end of the world, I promise. All right, so if you got into a PhD program, what are your tips for the application process? What do you think that worked for you? And if you were applying, what questions do you have that I didn't cover here? So you can leave those in the comments down below and I'll try to answer them individually, or if everyone has the same question, maybe I'll make another video. In fact, what would you like a deep dive on? I am planning to do maybe a couple more videos in this series. I'm thinking maybe how to choose a program, how to write a personal statement. So let me know what would be good for that. All right, well that's it. Happy hunting, everyone. I'm Casey and thank you for watching.